as the competition, the Prophet 10, the OBXA, and several other major products of the time. I still think today it beats any of those polysynths. First of all, it never goes out of tune. They all went out of tune. This was the first polysynth with digitally controlled oscillators in this section here at the top, and it means that you never need to press auto tune. With all those other things, you can put it in a hall, it starts to get warm or cold. I loathed that, and I still do, and I wouldn't ever use an instrument that required that. That means that we don't have to re-engineer it to modern standards, like Dave Smith has had to do with the Prophets, like Tom Oberheim is doing. They've had to go back to the drawing board and start again to use the more reliable technology of today, but the Synthex did it from day one. The other thing is that you'll see it had far more waveforms on the oscillators than anyone else had at the time, and instantly selectable by each had its own key. So you'll all be able to come and have a look at this more closely afterwards if you're not familiar. I just want to point out some of the other things that made me make that statement 33 years ago and make me stand by it today. The filter section, all polysynths only had a low pass filter. This has low pass, 2 different band pass and high pass, which was completely unique at the time and still remains quite rare today. What else was amazing about it? Well, the cross modulation on the oscillators. You may be familiar with the Prophets. They had a whole section on the side where you had to sit for 5 minutes to route things. This has one button and you cross modulate the oscillators. And some of the most famous sounds on the Synthex were made using those features. I should probably actually let the instrument do the talking, so I'm going to run you through a few of the sounds. What I started with there, Fanfare for the Common Man, those were 2 sounds that I programmed from scratch on the prototype that first night. It took me 10 minutes with a machine with no presets in to get that sound. I still can't get it on most other polysynths. Now let me give you an example of the high pass. Oh, by the way, it's done using doubling. I should have mentioned this is a split layer machine. So you've got 8 voices, but you can layer them on top of each other for a big 4-voice sound like that fanfare sound. Or you can split the keyboard and have 2 different sounds. But I'm going to put it back into the 1 sound mode at the moment. So I defy anyone to come up with this sound on all of those synths that I've just compared it to. None of those classic synths had a high-pass filter on them, so you just couldn't do that. You could only open it up from the bottom, so the bottom end was always going to be there whatever you did. But of course its bottom end is pretty good too. And when I worked with Stevie Wonder, it was really the bottom end on this. Just so you know, I took this synth in the boot of my car to a Stevie Wonder session because I was worried that all the synthesizers he owned wouldn't be able to do the sounds we needed. And within 30 minutes I'd gone out to the car to get it. And it was because of the fullness and the roundness of the bottom end. So just let me check I've got my right sound up here. Now we used to do a lot in those days of what I called additive synthesizers. So it wasn't additive synthesis where you put waveforms together. We used to MIDI 3 or 4 synths together, and we called that, it was a joke, we called it additive synthesizers. You MIDI'd them all together. And this was always used to put the low end in that we weren't getting from, he was using a lot of DX7s at the time, he was using a lot of samplers at the time, and we found that, you know, for that kind of, you know, strong dance records, you couldn't get the bottom end, and that's where this came in. And we would MIDI it to emulator 3s, we would MIDI it to Prophet 2000s, we'd MIDI it to the DX7 and the TX816 to put the low end back in.